are now in the second week of Advent, and we thought what better subjects for our little Christmas mini-series to look at over this jolly festive period than the terrifying rise of artificial intelligence and the end of the world. So that's what we've got for the next couple of weeks. I hope you're all excited. Those are our titles. And that may seem a little bit strange for a Sunday morning in Advent, but actually there is a tradition behind this, that as we prepare ourselves for Jesus' coming at Christmas, the church has always also looked towards Jesus' second coming, the time when Jesus will come and kind of make sense of this whole world and all the things that are going on in it, and sort of bring everything to its grand conclusion. And so with those kind of so what we're going to do is we're going to split this over. So this week, I'm going to be looking at what is the Christian response to AI and artificial intelligence. And then in a couple of weeks' time, Marcus is going to do part 2 and look about how do we stay hopeful in the face of fear and anxiety in this ever-changing world. So that's kind of how we're sort of tying this in. Now, I don't know about you, but I think my first encounters with AI was the ghosts on Pac-Man. Now, you may not realize this, but each one of the ghosts on Pac-Man has its own personality. They all have different playing styles. This is, obviously important if you really want to get to the higher levels in the games to know which ghost you're up against. And that was like one of the first experiences I had of like a console, a computer playing with its own seeming form of intelligence. If you aren't particularly au fait with artificial intelligence, or you've not really thought much about it, AI is where computers use large amounts of information and pattern recognition to mimic human decision-making. And we see it in all sorts of places. You'll particularly see it on your content feeds in your social media. So what decides what you're going to see based on your preferences and based on people similar to you. It's what recommends songs and films on your streaming platforms. And it's what finds you the best route home on Google Maps. So it's something that we find incredibly useful. The most famous example at the moment is AI chatbots. This is things like Google Gemini and ChatGPT. Okay, you've probably heard about these things. These programs have the ability to give human-like responses to whatever prompts you put into them. And for the most part, they are incredibly useful. So, for example, you can ask ChatGPT to give you suggestions for a day out with the kids, to organize your finances, to write you a poem, to find you a parking space, even write you a sermon. No, don't worry, this one is all me. And for the most part, they will do this in a few seconds much better than you or I could. So AI is incredibly useful. And even if it's not there yet, where it can do something better than us, the expectation is that over time, it will just get smarter and smarter and better able to do the things that we take pride in, things that we do. And obviously, with any technology like this, incredible opportunities are there. But there's also incredible threats as well. And so we kind of want to have a look at this and have a sense of how do we respond to this as Christians. And we will go into the bigger issues, deep fakes, phishing scams, a singularity and robots taking over the world. I'm leaving that all for Marcus in 2 weeks. But today I want to focus on what is the impact that AI is having on us as human beings, as like who we are meant to be as creatures made by God. And the main thing I want us to consider as we think about AI is that it is good for what we do, but it's not so good for who we are. In our reading today, one of the early followers of Jesus, a guy called Paul, is writing from Ephesus in Turkey to an expanding church in Corinth in Greece. And in the letter, he reminds the Corinthian Christians that the way of Jesus is a way of weakness, it's a way of humility, and it is, in most human senses, a way of failure. Now, Paul had a lot of achievements under his belt. He was an expert in the Jewish Bible. He had traveled most of the known world planting churches. He'd overcome suffering and hardship. But the Corinthian Christians saw him as a bit of a failure. He didn't match up to many of the other teachers and preachers they'd heard around, because the way that he lived is he embraced kind of essentially the poor, the weak, the people who wouldn't otherwise impress the world very much. But at this point in his ministry, he's well known, he's starting to see a bit of success, and it says that God had given him a thorn in the flesh. Now, we don't actually know what this is. We don't get explained. It says that a thorn in the flesh was given to me, a messenger of Satan to buffet me. We're not really, there's no more clarity to what that is. Some people think it's like a physical ailment. Some people see it as a spiritual thing. Some people see it as the fact that he's in prison at that time. But whatever it is, it's something that is hindering his ministry, hindering the things that he's meant to be doing for God, his work. Now, our culture has a tendency to value us based on our productivity. You are important because of the amount of wealth you generate. You are important because of what you create. Value is very much linked to what we contribute. And God flips this on its head because he shows that he is more concerned with who we are than what we do. And we see this as Paul becomes more and more productive and successful in his ministry. He's at risk of becoming conceited, of getting arrogant. And so God gives him this thorn in the flesh that inhibits him from being productive. And Paul's response is to recognize that God has done this because he's more concerned with Paul's character, with who he is, than he is about Paul's achievements. God is always more concerned with who we are than what we do. And while who we are obviously has some connection with what we do, if you can't be a kind person without doing kind things, those things that has to have an outworking. I would argue that the main risk of AI, when we look at it, is that what we do doesn't have to have an impact on who we are. So we can achieve things without it having an effect on us. And this is important to get from the outset, because our relationship with AI is going to be massively influenced by where we are and how much we value productivity and how much we value character. Now, the Christian view of humanity, because this is important, what we think about what it means to be a human is going to think about what the impact of AI is on our humanity. So we have to think about what the Christian view of humanity is. And the Christian view of humanity is an incredibly high one. That every human being is made profoundly beautiful in the image of God with a divine calling to partner with him. And for Christians, Jesus is our perfect example of what humanity was meant to look like. The way he lives, the way he acts, that is it's almost like we were given the recipe for what life is meant to look like. And we had a go. And like most of my cooking, it came out with something that is vaguely edible. You think you could do something with it. But then God brings out in Jesus this 5-tier wedding cake and says to us, this is kind of what I was going for. Like, this is what I have planned for your life. This is what I want your life to look like and the things that you do and who you are. And my next page. Because God knows that when humanity, all of humanity, is restored to his likeness, to what it was always meant to be, full of the kindness, the love, and the holiness of Christ, the world that follows after that will be absolutely stunning. But if we try and achieve that world without having our hearts transformed by God, then the world that will result will be far less than perfect. And so when I say AI is good for what we do, but it's not good for who we are, I mean it very specifically in regards to our journey of becoming like Jesus. And just to explore this, what I want to do is look at two big areas of all of our lives. It's our work and our relationships. And kind of try and think, how does this thing that God is concerned with who we are more than what we do, and the idea that AI is good for what we do and not good for who we are, how does that look in work and in relationships? Well, first of all, what is the Christian view of work? Well, work in the Bible is something that existed in the Garden of Eden before everything went wrong. It's seen as a good thing. And our work that we're invited into with God is to join in his ongoing act of creating the world. So it's like God starts it off and then he draws us into it and he says, great, you name the animals, you give some names, okay? You cultivate the earth, see what plants and fruit you can bring forth. God invites us into that. So creativity and the work that goes with it is part of who we are. And if we are to believe that God is all-powerful, then we have to assume that God giving us work is not something he needs from us. That is something he gives for us. Like, for example, when I get my kids to empty the dishwasher, I am very aware that I could do it a lot quicker than they could. I'm also very aware that it would probably be less stressful for me if I did it instead of them. But there's something in that act that I'm teaching them how to appreciate the things that I do for them. I'm teaching them how to be hardworking. I'm teaching them skills that will ultimately help them enjoy their life more. And so the main reason the Creator allows us to work is because of what it does in us, not what it does for him. Now, AI, on the other hand, when we look at all these things that ChatGPT and Google Gemini, all these things can do for us, although amazing, they are largely concerned with what we produce and not what takes place in the process. I don't know if you've ever noticed, but have you ever noticed that life doesn't seem to get any easier? Like, we have dishwashers, vacuum cleaners, washing machines, hot running water inside, we have electric lights, and yet we have all the tools that would blow the minds of generations in the past, but life still feels pretty hard. I don't know if that's just me, but I feel like the people around me have that experience as well. Because however much we change our situation, we still seem to find life a struggle. Like, when I was a student, I found it hard to get up to go to lectures at 10 o'clock in the morning. Like, that was a real strain when I was a student. And then I got a job, and I had to get into the office for 9, and that was really hard. And then I became a teacher, and I had to get into school for 7:30, and that was really hard. And then I had kids who got up at all hours of the night, and that was really hard. But then my kids started sleeping through. It was a big moment, because suddenly getting up at 6:30 in the morning actually wasn't that hard. It was like, oh my goodness, I've just had a whole night's sleep. Oh my goodness. Now, if you'd asked me at any point during that time, what do I want? What would I have said? More sleep. Oh my goodness, it's the only thing I wanted at that time. But whatever time I had to get up, it was hard. The situation actually didn't really matter. What made the difference in the long run was the formation and the discipline taking place in me. Every time I had to get up a little bit earlier, something changed in me. And AI gives us a shortcut which allows us to get the task done without going through the difficult formational journey of doing it ourselves. And I mean, in some ways, this is true of most technological developments, but AI is like this on steroids. Think about a craftsman with a set of woodworking tools. A saw, a knife, a vise, in the right pair of hands, with the right level of strength and skill. These tools allow a craftsman to take a block of wood and make something beautiful out of it, a figurine or a toy. But rather than a tool, AI is more like a machine, a whole production line that at the push of a button can take a whole tree and turn it into more figurines than a craftsperson can make in our lifetime. Now, I could now tell AI to write me a novel, and it will, in a moment, create a beautiful piece of literature better than anything I could ever create. And it will do it in a couple of minutes. Now, and even if it wasn't better than me now, it won't be long until it is. And it won't be much longer until it's better than Shakespeare and Dostoevsky. Because that's the way this technology develops. And it's the same for writing your vision statement for your business. It's the same for analyzing CVs as part of your recruitment. It's the branding for your website. It's deciding where to invest people's money and where not to. Now, putting aside the very obvious threats to people's employments, Amazon recently announced the layoffs of 14,000 corporate workers thanks to generative AI. Putting that aside, for us right now, we want to think about what does that mean for me as individuals as we embrace AI to increase our own productivity. In 1997, the specialized chess computer Deep Blue decisively beat the world chess champion Garry Kasparov. And in that moment, it exhibited the superiority of AI over human intelligence. And it was a dramatic moment, but it didn't mean that people stopped playing chess. They didn't hand chess over to the robots and say, well, look, they're better at it. Let's let them handle. They can play all the chess, and we'll just go about doing the washing up and stuff. No, because we recognize that there is a joy in the act of playing. And there is something that takes place in us during the process that doesn't depend on the outcome. And because of this, I know for me, particularly having done the research for this sermon, I've become much stricter with letting AI touch things like I quite like writing, doing creative writing, writing short stories and things. And actually, I've almost had to hold it back from AI, from doing the temptation of saying, okay, can you just have a look at this and see if you can refine it or make it any better? I've been really careful with my communications, with any sort of letters or emails and things that I send, and particularly things to do with my spirituality. There are elements of those things which I find are tied to my humanity, God's calling on my life to be a creative being. And therefore, and also things the way I relate to other people. Those things I've had to kind of hold back because I see them as tied to who I am. My wife, Amy, was telling me how she was in work the other day and they were handing around a card for someone who had gone on maternity leave. And one of the doctors confessed that they'd used they'd used ChatGPT to compose the 2-line message that they'd put in the card. And you're laughing, but there's got to be someone in the room who's done that. And while no one would know the difference, if anything, the recipient would probably receive a better message, a more heartfelt message. But I just felt when I heard that story, that there was something in it that doctor had missed out on the small challenge of navigating the awkward line between over-sentimental mush and overused cliche and thinking even for a moment about their feelings. Like, they probably know, yeah, I could do this. I could write that message. I know if you had enough time, I could sit there and work it out. But there was something about it where you go, oh, but it'll be quicker to get the computer to do it. And actually something in that moment, I just felt like they'd given over a little bit of their humanity, a little bit of their divine calling to a machine. There's no hard and fast rule with these things. That's the point. When we talk about AI, it's so useful. There's so many wonderful things it will achieve and make people's lives better in lots of ways. But we do need to be regularly asking us, by giving this task to AI, am I losing out on the honor of fulfilling God's calling on my life? Is this something that an all-powerful God who created the cosmos in 7 days has chosen to give to me to do, given me the honor of doing? Because if God could do it as quickly as that, and that he's chosen to let us do it, then in some ways for us to pass it on again is to kind of go, wow, I've missed out on something here. And now you've also recognizing that in the midst of this, as we start to say, actually, there are times where I'm not going to use this, there is an inevitable downside of this, that if your friends and your colleagues and your competitors are using this, they will be more productive. And that will be really, really hard. Because if you're doing that with work and things like that, you're suddenly saying, oh my goodness, I'm not going to be able to compete with some of these people if there are certain things I won't let AI touch in my life. But there's that one question that Jesus asked that I found so penetrating when I was praying about this. He says, what good is it for someone to gain the whole world and forfeit their very soul? And I just think and I'm not, I don't want to we're not here to make AI scary and make it fear-mongering and stuff. But I think that question, to think, am I losing anything of myself in this process by giving this over to someone else to do or to hand it out? So that's work. And I kind of wanted to start with that one because I think that's something that, in different ways relates to all of us, even if it's school or education and things like that. AI is concerned with our productivity, but not what's gained or lost in the process. But that's work. What about in our relationships? Well, AI has the potential to make us feel loved, but it also has the potential to make us be less loving. Now, as AI takes on more and more human characteristics, we can start to engage with it as we would another human. I find myself referring to my Alexa as she rather than as an it, which means that when I'm being very rude to her, suddenly I feel bad for my kid, like my kids are hearing it. I'm like, no, that's not how you talk to a person. That's how you talk to a robot. That's different. But getting very frustrated when the sound won't go up or down. But on the light end, we can use ChatGPT as a sounding board to bounce our ideas off, a bit of a social thermometer where we start to use it to judge what are people's responses. But on the extreme end, and this is becoming so much more common, we have the proliferation of AI companions. So in the first half of 2025, AI companion apps netted 60 million downloads. So this is one of the biggest industries that's growing. It's going to overtake porn. It's seen as bigger than anything. It's crazy. So, but if you don't know what an AI companion is, some of them are designed to be AI friends, but the majority are AI boyfriends or girlfriends. They have realistic-looking avatars who can video chat with you. They message periodically throughout the day. And for the user, the experience is similar to a long-distance relationship. Some people have these as their main relationship. Some have them as secondary relationships alongside a human partner. Sometimes the human partner's fine with it. Sometimes they don't know about it. There just seems to be a range of experiences of people using these things. And the thing is I imagine these things bring a lot of joy to people. A lot of pleasure and excitement and fun. And particularly for someone who's lonely, the experience must be enlivening. They would be so realistic. But to bring it back to our main point, there is a huge risk with things like this to our growth and our development as human beings made in the likeness of Christ. That thing that is at the center of our humanity. Psychiatrist Dr. Kurt Thompson says that we are all born searching for someone searching for us. We are all born searching for someone searching for us. With AI, we might be able to experience the sensation of love and a relationship, but it won't ever give us the confidence that another person completely independent of us knows us and loves us. Instead, if it's a program that will always justify our behavior, however violent, neurotic, or cruel we might be, without breaking up with us, it allows us to stay just as we are and never be forced to grow or change. It's the complete opposite of our relationship with God, because God fully knows us, fully loves us, but deeply desires us to grow into the fullness of everything he made us for. Being fully known and fully loved by God is like the rich soil for which our soul will flourish and grow. When God gives Paul a thorn in the flesh, Paul knows and trusts that God well enough that he embraces the suffering, confident that he will grow through it. An AI companion is only as good as the way it makes us feel. Real relationships teach us how to love someone when they're difficult, when they're sick, when they're dying. Now, and so therefore they have the ability to grow us and change us in a way that a robot never could. Now, you may be thinking, well, I don't have an AI companion. I don't plan on getting one. What does this have to do with me? But this mindset of what do I get out of a relationship is actually something that's endemic in our society. It's something that's growing, and it represents the culture that we live in. And I feel like God cares a lot about this, because the majority of the New Testament is addressed not to individuals, but to churches, to communities. God expects Christians to participate in community, in church, because it is in here, it is in this community, not just our meetings, but in the way we are with each other, that we meet each other's needs. And it's also here that we grow in love and self-giving after the manner of Christ. It is the people in church who are least like you, who are the most difficult to be around, that do the most work on your soul. Most people living and working in London don't encounter people who are outside of their socioeconomic bracket. But God throws Christians into this strange community of every tribe, of every tongue, and every nation, because he knows it is here that we will be refined and purified into the image of Jesus. After 20 years as a successful academic theologian, Henry Nouwen resigned his teaching position at Harvard Divinity School, and he went to work with people with intellectual disabilities at L'Arche Community in Toronto. Now, Nouwen was paired with a man called Adam, who had restricted mobility, he had limited ability to communicate, he was unable to express love or affection in any conventional way, and he needed support in the most basic of tasks. Nouwen was responsible for dressing, feeding, and washing Adam every day, a task that could take up to over 2 hours every morning. And at first, for this well-respected, highly praised academic, it felt like a frustrating, pointless exercise. But over time, Nouwen discovered things about Adam. He discovered that Adam had an astonishing capacity to transform the lives of the people he encountered. That in Adam's presence, people found themselves able to reflect on their own vulnerabilities and their own disabilities. Nouwen found that although Adam couldn't walk, he himself couldn't stop rushing around. That although Adam couldn't speak, Nouwen found that he spoke far too much. That although Adam was completely dependent, it was Nouwen who was always shouting for help. When Adam died at the age of 34, hundreds of people turned up at his funeral. Hundreds of people whose lives he had touched. Nouwen's reflection of this unproductive person, this person with more thorns in his flesh than most, was this. He said, "Here is the man who more than anyone connected me with my inner self, my community, and my God. Here is the man I was asked to care for, but who took me into his life and into his heart in such an incredibly deep way. Adam was my teacher, my friend, my guide. He was the one who more than any book or professor led me to the person of Jesus." And I just thought, Nouwen's book about his relationship with Adam, it speaks so much about what we think our life is about, like how successful and how productive we are compared to what God does in us and through us. And then also like what it means to be valued and made in the image of God. Like, it is much easier to be a Christian on your own. It just is. But it's much harder to become like Christ on your own. Where AI offers us to be loved without requiring anything of us, God calls us into a radically self-giving love in our friendships, in our relationships, and in our church. And through those relationships, he restores us to who we are made to be, restores us to Christlikeness. Writer Gabriel Mate puts it like this: we all need someone to be with us in our fear, our guilt, and shame. We need someone to tell us we are not alone. We need someone to explain forgiveness. We need someone to see our shame and tell us we're still loved. We need a personal encounter that lifts the burden. Now, AI can and will only get better at simulating this. It can tell us we're forgiven and that we're loved, but AI is never independent of us. You'll notice how if you ever play around with ChatGPT, it always responds in the same language that you use. So if you write very formally, it will speak formally back to you. If you write informally, it will sort of, in a relaxed way, back to you. But AI is always, therefore, a reflection of us. There's a lot of stuff I know around research. I was chatting to some guys who work for Apple the other day, and they were saying about how it'll always say, that's a great idea. Whatever you put in, it'll say, that's a great idea. Unless legally bound not to, it'll just say, wonderful idea, here's how you might make it better. That's the way it works. That's the way it's told. That's what AI is meant to do. It's a reflection of us, and it's meant to affirm us and make us feel good about ourselves. But when we pray and when we speak to God, we come across someone who is inherently other to us. God is completely apart from us. And so when he chooses to draw close to us, when he accepts us, when he tells us we are loved and forgiven, he speaks a truth to us that is so powerful and transformative. Now, AI is just another technology. And actually, like all technological developments, it is good for what we do. But like all technological developments, it poses huge risks to who we are. And although I've probably been more negative today than positive, our response is not to be afraid of this, but it's also not to be unaware of the risks. AI can make us more productive, but we have to be aware of what's lost in that process. AI can make us feel more loved, but it can be at the cost of our ability to show love to others and to grow into being the people who are like Jesus. Our response, therefore, is not going to be to hide away from AI and avoid it altogether. Our response is to reaffirm our commitment to growing in Christlikeness. That's what we're called to. That's what it means to be Christian. That's what we have got to do with our lives. And then we let that take us wherever it will. And if AI helps us in that, then wonderful. If it doesn't, then we avoid it, because that's what we're committed to. That's what our lives are drawn towards. And that might mean embracing a thorn in the flesh. It might be taking on the thing that refines our characters. It's joining Jesus on the path of weakness, of failure, of humility, so that in eternity we might be raised up with him and know the fullness of God's vision for who we are. I mean, that is who we are, is the thing that gets carried on into eternity. And so for the more time and energy we invest in it, the more we know we're doing something that has eternal worth. Just want to give you a moment. I feel there's a lot of stuff in there to think about. And I just want to give you a moment to think about two questions. I'm just going to chuck them up on the screen. What would my life look like? And actually, I think these are questions you can ask God. So let's maybe close our eyes for a moment and ask God these two questions. What would my life look like if I cared as much about who I am as I do about what I achieve? And then the second question, what would my life look like if I gave out more love than I received? Just going to give us a moment to think those things through, and then I'll pray in a moment.